You're listening to IOE Insights, the UCL Institute of Education podcast at University College London.
This is Academia SR, the podcast for anyone and everyone figuring out life in academia.
This is Academia EL, the podcast for early career academics. I am Zeinab El Khateeb. I'm a lecturer in teacher education at the IOE UCL Faculty of Education and Society. In this series of episodes, we are going to hear stories about academic journeys, achievements, and legacy, which we hope will inspire you to embark on your own adventure as an early career researcher. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Gideon Sappor in the studio here with us. He is an associate professor in early years and primary education. He is also the co-inclusion lead for the IOE Department of Learning and Leadership. His research interests are in the broader areas around the factors that predict higher academic performance and achievement in children. Dr. Gideon, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you on the studio here today with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you. The first question, it would be helpful if you could provide the audience with an overview of your academic journey and progression to the present day.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure.
I grew up in Ghana, so my undergraduate degree was in psychology. After undergrad, I worked in corporates for a few years, and my academic journey started when I started working, trained to be a primary school teacher in the UK, and then started working as a teacher. And as a teacher, I could recognize some children in my classes who I knew were able to perform, had the potential to perform at the level of their peers, but there seemed to be something that held them back. So that was a question that had been niggling at me. Why do some of these children not realize that they've got the potential to achieve to a higher level as some of their peers? So throughout my primary school journey, that has been in the background. Primary school teacher journey. And then initially I had wanted to train to be a head teacher when I started teaching in the primary school. But there were other events that I'm not going to go into that made me not want to be a head teacher anymore. So since childhood, I had always wanted to be a professor. So the thought just came to say, oh, this is something that I've always wanted to do, to be. I didn't even actually understand what it meant at the time when I wanted to be a professor. So I thought, okay, I've got these questions that I want to understand. And that drove me into the study to apply for the PhD and then to do some research. And that led me to research on self-regulated learning skills and how that develops in children and how culture influences how they are developed. So it is towards the end of my PhD, I got opportunity to start teaching in psychology because my PhD is in psychology. I started teaching in the psychology department as a student, as a PhD student, alongside working part-time as a primary school teacher. And that, I would say, was the gateway to enable me to apply for the job in ITE here at the IOE, and then my development grew from then on.
Excellent. And you started to do a teaching job alongside with the PhD at the IOE as well?
Yes, I did.
And you are a part-time teacher as well?
Yes.
Wow, wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you. And that leads us to the next question. Which professional accomplishment or initiative do you consider the most significant to date?
Professional accomplishment. Well, as a primary school teacher, I Yeah, so I mean, I'm a associate professor now, but I will first go to my primary school teacher days,
Yeah.
where I had a class where there were some boys who were earmarked to be excluded or dismissed because they were too
Yeah.
much trouble. And I made it my mission to support them to stay and to achieve, which I did. And I think that beats most things I could say I've accomplished. But here in the university, an accomplishment will be navigating courses that I led through COVID
Well, of
and
course. Yeah.
working to adapt the courses from courses that were designed for in-person, face-to-face delivery to an online provision and make it as successful as they were. And some of the lessons learned from that has become a blueprint for a lot of things that I do and we do today, I would say.
Yeah. I suppose COVID was something, a complete surprise. And at that point, you had to develop what you have to move to online platform. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So we're not prepared for it. So it just came out of the blue. I remember taking on the leadership of a module the previous autumn, a new module to the department that I had to redesign. And then turn of the year, the lockdowns happened. So I have to now redesign the redesigned module to make it fit for sole online delivery. That was a challenge, but I would say I'm pleased with what we're able to achieve.
Absolutely. And it's sometimes going through that, it challenges, it brings the best out of you. And
Yes,
that's accomplishment.
exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you. And that takes us to the third question. So, was there an individual who inspired your intellectual development? And did their research focus align with your interests? It could be one individual or it could be many individuals.
Okay, so maybe you want me to focus on, I'm assuming you want to focus on the academia element of inspiration, because I could go back and talk about my mom and,
Of course, yes. It could be personal and professional.
oh, okay. So then I have to talk about
Please.
my mother, because my mom
Us.
never went to school. So she
Yeah.
could not read and write English, but she made sure I did my reading from childhood, and I couldn't get past her. Even though she couldn't read the book, she made sure she knew what was in the books, and we could still talk read about what was in the book, even though she couldn't read it. So I would say that was pivotal in my exposure to reading, to learning, to books, and that drive to succeed academically. My dad as well. And it takes a village. So I have uncles and aunties who, too many to mention. But in the academic space, I will give credit to my supervisor. All I had when I started my PhD journey was an idea, a hunger to learn, understand something, as I said, about the children in my class. But he was able to guide me, and he believed in me and supported me to develop as an academic, at least at the doctoral training and education stage. And then upon gaining my PhD, one of the people who's had the most impact on me has been Professor Calendar, because meeting her enabled me to understand myself better and to learn to navigate the space and to train, learn, develop, and keep my focus. Because in academia, there are so many things that can distract and take you away from your focus. And sometimes it needs people who would help focus you to focus on what is important. So yes, Professor Calendar has been one. I have an auntie in Ghana. Well, I'll be traveling for a funeral in a couple of weeks. So it's interesting we're having this conversation at this time.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Lovely, wonderful. And I like how it's personal and professional, how all linked together. I do agree with you. IO is a huge place, and if you don't have signposted or mentoring, you do get lost sometimes. Thank you. That's really interesting to hear. I like what you discussed about, from your childhood. I like what you talked about in your classroom. And it is so much like, obviously, your mother being in the picture there with you and having to help you, inspiring you. That is, would you mind to expand further on, and how was your childhood and also being as a teacher? Because I'm aware myself, I was a teacher myself for many years. And even my PhD, very similar to your situation, which helping children who couldn't read, speak English as a first language. I would like, if you don't mind, to just expand further in how your childhood and being a teacher have helped you to achieve.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is really important. So thank you for this for asking this follow up, because I didn't say this about like one of my greatest achievements, but becoming an associate professor was a big deal for me and for my family for that reason of the background I'm coming from. But I remember having a conversation with a colleague recently who didn't see, because of where they came from in their background, becoming a professor is not as much of a big deal for them, But if you understand where I'm coming from, so we had this conversation at that level. Now, if you Google a place in Accra called Nima, 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 and audience, you can Google it. You will find out it's a slum. Well, I grew up there.
Yeah.
I grew up in Nima. And I had a happy childhood. Growing up in that place, it doesn't mean, it's not like what you see on telly, stereotypical slums and on telly with children with flies on their noses. No, that's not, no. I had a very happy childhood. Yes.
I can imagine.
I didn't have running water in my house or a flush toilet in my house, but I had a very happy childhood. My childhood was great. But in terms of of academically, there was that drive from my parents for me to succeed in my education, because education is the only and has been the only passport I've had to get me out of that background. Education has been the passport. So even though my mom could not read, she used to tell me, you will go to Legon, that is university. You will go to Legon, read your book. And actually, one of the things I still want to achieve that I haven't achieved yet is to build libraries across Ghana, because I had to travel for miles to get to the nearest library, the children's library in central Accra, so I could read Enid Blyton and Tales of Narnia and my Tintin comics, and I love Asterix, and I had to travel far to access books to read beyond what my mom could provide, because my mom used to sell smoked fish in the market, and she would buy books from hawkers and bring home for me to read. And she would get the hawkers to explain, to tell her everything in the book. If it's an information book on the page by page basis, we have to explain to her what each page was on each page. If it was a story, was a fiction, you have to tell her the story and who was in the story and the names of the characters and what they did. So she had to memorize what was in the books before she would buy it. And then when she brought it home, it took me, I learned very quickly that I couldn't get past her. So I remember one of the first encounters, she brought a book home and I knew she couldn't read. So she said, Gideon, have you read it? And I said, yeah. And she said, what's in the book? And I made something up. And she was so angry at me for lying to her.
Gosh.
And she made me read it. And then we talked about what was in the book. And so I learned not to do that, because that was disrespectful to her and insulting as well. But I then loved reading for its sake. So through that journey, I got to learn and understand that reading, learning was going to be my passport out of that background. So I went to university. I got a job in the oil company Shell after university. And I came to the UK to do an MBA in finance because I was a corporate-minded person.
Yeah. Do you still use these skills that you carried on and you transferred it for your teaching as well, I believe?
I still do, because in my teaching, as well, let's start from primary schools.
Yeah.
As a primary school teacher, and I only worked in challenging schools. I didn't work with in the leafy suburbs. I saw those children as me, no matter what their prior attainment was, no matter what their behavior was when they came to me. I saw these children as me in Nima, who are going to get an education that will be their passport to have a better life. So that was a driving force of those children. And like I said about those boys, they were boys who were earmarked to be excluded. Who was a year 6 class, and I remember being told, "Don't worry, we'll get rid of them for you so that you can focus on teaching the rest of the class." And I said, "No, leave them to me." And I worked with those boys, and we were successful together because of that. And in moving into university, luckily, the privilege is I work in ITE, I work in primary education on the MA as well. So I am able to carry on that same way of thinking with the students who I get a privilege to work with, to let them understand, not to look down on any child, let them understand that in front of them is a child who could become the prime minister, a child who could find a cure for cancer, a child who will bring world peace. That's how I saw children in the classroom.
Yeah, looking for potential, isn't it?
Yeah, to impart that to the students.
Yeah.
To focus on achieving that with their children, with the children they get the privilege of working with, and not see any child as a problem child or as a child, look at a child negatively. Because our job is educate, to help, to move children from where they are to a better, and that's the job.
Inclusively, even though if the
Inclusivity,
children.
exactly.
Exactly. And perhaps that also led you to become the lead of inclusion. I can see the links now between your journey, isn't it?
Yes, so exactly. So you can tell all the other things I do apart from teaching is in the same vein. So I'm a dignity at work advisor for UCL because of knowing what it feels like. So I can help other people. I do fair recruitment. I'm a fair recruitment specialist, so I sit on interview panels to recruit staff into UCL because I've been there. I was that boy from Nima who got a chance to make progress all the way through to get to where he is. So I know what it's like. I've been there. I've lived it. I still live it.
Of course, it's an ongoing journey. And it is amazing how you link and you relate to those children.
Exactly.
And it's wonderful to remember all that and enable to help them as a
Yeah.
class teacher and also as a university professor. And it's amazing what you're doing at the moment, if it's as your job as a class teacher or also as a university professor.
Yeah, I think the outlook is the same for me. It's the same.
It's amazing how it's all interlinked as well, and you're still carrying that skills and the mindset, as you say, to develop now, university students. Wonderful. Last question. What advice academic do you have for early career researchers? They could be including staff member or student or both. Because as you know, some of the staff members like yourself, like me, are student and staff members. What will be your academic advice to them?
I think for the student part, I always say to people who talk about doing doctoral study, the question is, why are you doing it? Are you doing it just to get a title, or is that something you are passionate about? Because if it's just to get a title, then you will hit the buffers, challenges will come, and then it becomes difficult to move beyond those challenges. But for someone like me, I spoke about my mother. One of my driving forces from childhood, I wanted to be a professor. I didn't even know you had to do a PhD to become a professor. Well, not necessarily.
At that young age, you don't
Yes.
know.
My
Of course.
mom used to tell me the University of Ghana where I studied is just known by Legon, because it's in a place called Legon. And my mom, as a child, used to tell me, "You will go to Legon, go and read your book. You will go to Legon, go and read your book." So you have to have a driving force. So, and on my PhD study, there were bits were very challenging, but I had this driving force that my mother never went to school, but she will have a son who is a doctor. So that was something that pushed me. And then I was passionate about what I was researching as well. I needed to understand why some of these children, what made some of them of similar potential achieve higher than others. What's missing? What's the missing link there? So that was a driving force. And that kept me going through to the end. Becoming an academic, I think an important thing is, particularly, and I will say this, if you are an ethnic minority or global majority like myself, who, the way we perceive things in the present is guided by things that happened in the past, prior experiences. And for someone, for example, who had been told in a forum that one thing that would stop me from becoming a head teacher is mine off-putting accent, as it was put then. And things that happened at the time, and then being in the space where things were also happening, well, as I perceive them, were against my progress, against my ability to be successful. And I could, for some of the stuff, one could only say, oh, maybe because I'm different, or maybe it's because the way I speak. So there are a lot of things that come up. But in academic space, one has to learn to focus. And one has to understand that you cannot do it alone. One has to learn to work with people, get alongside people, sometimes proving to people that of your substance, what you bring to the table. It's really, really important as an academic, particularly if you are from an ethnic minority, not to be drawn into the negatives or the race issues and the barriers and they've done this and then. No, some of the issues are just human issues, and we have more agency than we realize. And if we learn to find the right people to support us, we can navigate the space. It's about navigation. Somebody to advise you, to mentor you. But then if somebody is to mentor you, you have to be ready to be mentored. You have to be ready to be mentored. I remember the day, I'm not going to mention names here, but myself and somebody were told, do a particular thing because it's going to be good for your career. I went that day and I logged in online and I started doing it straight away. I'm talking about something that happened 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
I did it straight away that day. Went online, I made the time and I did it. But the other person still today hasn't done it. So is it a lack of agency and a lack of work, or is it the system that is working against someone? Well, I think we have more agency than we realize, and we need to hold ourselves responsible for our progress as well. Don't be dragged into negativity. Navigate, work with people. You can't do it alone. Find people, work with people. Yes, find a mentor, but be ready to be mentored.
Absolutely, and be that flexible and adaptable, isn't it? And take on board what more experienced colleagues can advise you with. Absolutely, I completely agree. Very, very, very interesting journey, Gideon, here. And thank you so much for sharing your journey, your ideas, and your thought, and also your advice. It has been a pleasure to have you with us today, and thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
Please follow the link in the show notes to find out more about Dr. Gideon Sappor's work, as well as discovering more podcasts from the IOE. And if you like what you've heard, please give the IOE podcast a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. This will help us reach more listeners who may also enjoy the podcast. I'm Zainab. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.
Academia et al. Is brought to you by the IOE's Early Career Network and IOE Marketing and Communications. The podcast is presented by Zeinab El Khateeb. The theme music was composed by Ronnie Shu, editing by Teresa Baker of UCL Educational Media, and Jason Alagan is the executive producer of the IOE podcast.
Thanks for listening. Search IOE Insights for more podcasts from the IOE.